You're listening to The Authenticity Show, where you get to eavesdrop on great conversations about health, creativity, and the quest for excellence. Your host today is Carlos Casados. Our guest today is James Tsakalos. Now, James actually has the distinct honor of being our very first repeat guest. We interviewed him last year from Melbourne, Australia over Zoom, but this time he came to California and sat down in person with Carlos. James is an internationally acclaimed NLP trainer and innovator who has studied with all three of the co-creators of NLP, Richard Bandler, John Grinder, and Frank Purcell. He's also the developer of Spiral Somatics, which is a groundbreaking method of reading the subtle physiological indicators of fundamental values, attitudes, and core beliefs.
So, welcome to the Authenticity Show, James Tsakalos.
Thank you, Carlos Casados.
I should say, welcome back, because this is not the first time. I'm going to say it. So, welcome back. Here I am.
Thank you very much. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's excellent. First of all, great to see you again, and also I'm glad that we're going to get to explore some of the topics that we've been covering over the last couple of weeks, because you, in fact, came here a couple of weeks ago to teach round 2 of the Spiral Somatics course, which I really enjoyed taking the second time for a lot of reasons. And we're going to get a little, for those who haven't heard about Spiral Somatics yet, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Those who have, who've heard our other episode, where we interviewed James talking about Spiral Somatics, there'll be a little bit of review on that. So can we talk a little bit about, just first broadly, what is Spiral Somatics, and also why would someone even be interested in hearing about it or studying it, getting into it?
Ah, buggered if I know. No, it's pretty cool stuff. So Spiral Somatics, for people who are not familiar with it, which is going to be almost the entire population of the Earth, is really simple way of describing this is it's a way of exploring the link between body and mind. It's a way of exploring the ways in which your physiology shapes your internal experience and your perceptions, and also the ways in which your internal experience and perceptions shape your physiology. That's a link that goes both ways, because most people are familiar with that to the extent that, you know, you can tell if someone is kind of slumped over and they've got a big pout on their face and they're all teary and stuff like that, then they're probably not very happy right now, you know. So there are certain things that for most people are pretty obvious, like you know that, you know, you see this happening in someone's physiology, it indicates certain things about them. But there is no limits to that. Anything that happens inside you is expressed in your physiology. And anything that you do with your physiology has an effect, maybe a little effect, but has an effect on what happens inside you. So Spiral Somatics is just a very deep and rigorous and thorough exploration of some of those links. And it was the result of me extending on and refining some work that was first pioneered by my mentor, the late Roger Diener, who discovered some pretty amazing things, because he had... I teach NLP. Roger was a masterful teacher of NLP, but he was also an expert in another field, and that field was called spiral dynamics, and in fact still is. Although Roger was more closely associated with a guy called Don Beck than Chris Cohen, and so Roger kind of got drawn to Don Beck's particular blend, particular variation of spiral dynamics, the result of his collaboration with Ken Wilber into Spiral Dynamics Integral. But Roger was an expert in this thing called spiral dynamics, which is a way of exploring different ways of making sense of the world and navigating through the world, different kind of cultural blueprints, I guess, and in particular the way in which cultures transition through different phases as conditions in that culture change. So Roger was an expert in that stuff, but he also was an NLP trainer, and so he wanted to know, because it was fairly theoretical, it was fairly abstract, I guess, and so Roger wanted to know, are there things that you can manipulate? Are there things that are observable? Are there things, can we take this out of the realm of just abstract ideas and into something that's concrete that you can really get your hands into? And so he did some some exploration, some experimentation, and discovered that there are certain telltale signs, let's say, in someone's physiology that will let you know how they do the world. So, a little bit like in this country right now, there are people who are particularly conservative, and their experience of the world is a particular way, and they love Donald Trump, and they have particular views. And there are other people who have very different views and have a very different experience of the world. And so there's a lot of that stuff around, and Roger was able to kind of detect, just based on how someone was using their physiology, how they were using their body, the kind of experience of the world that person is likely to be having, and the way that they're likely to filter their experience to create meaning in the world. And so I took Roger's work and extended on it and refined it, and also, before that, I did some modeling, because he explicitly was able to present certain of his findings, but he also implicitly was responsive to a whole bunch of other stuff that he never kind of presented explicitly. I know this is very abstract, but let's say he explicitly was able to teach some really basic distinctions in terms of the body-mind link, but he himself was quite adept at recognizing and responding to much more subtle, much more sophisticated, much more complex distinctions. But he wasn't aware consciously, or certainly didn't teach consciously, the things that he was responding to. And so I had to figure that stuff out myself by, spending a whole bunch of time around him and finding some patterns. That was the beginning of me then kind of extending on his work and refining his work, which then continued and is still continuing.
So you're actually the developer of Spiral Somatics.
Yeah, it started with Roger's first distinctions, but everything since then. So you just came from an 8-day training. The stuff that Roger discovered, he could teach in about half a day, basically. So,
I see.
But the stuff that he did went much, much, much deeper than that. But he never taught it, and I don't know that he was consciously aware of everything that he was responsive to. And so I did a lot of modeling of the stuff that he didn't teach, and then went on and developed things beyond that. And the most valuable thing about Spiral Somatics is not about other people at all. It's about recognizing in your body the way that you hold yourself, and how that shapes your own experience, and how that shapes your thinking in the way that you perceive the world, and how it limits your thinking and your experience in the way that you perceive the world, and learning how to relate with your body in different ways, so that you can begin to experience the world fundamentally differently, and develop a lot more flexibility in terms of the way that you experience the world, in terms of the way that you make meaning of things, in terms of all of that kind of stuff. It's developing a kind of flexibility of perception, a flexibility of identity, a flexibility of being, because there are just too many people who have this idea that they are in a box, that they are,
right.
This is the kind of person I am, and more importantly, they have this idea that I'm not that kind of person, right? They limit themselves, thinking, well, I couldn't do that. Other people could do that kind of thing, but I can't do that. I'm not that kind of person. I just don't have what it takes. I couldn't do that kind of thing. If I did that, it wouldn't be me, right? As if who the hell else is it going to be? If you did it, of course it's going to be you, right? But they have this idea, and they keep themselves in these boxes. And so Spiral Somatics is something that allows people to, by relating with themselves differently, by relating with themselves at a physiological level as well as a mental level and emotional level differently, allows them to recognize that they are not any kind of person, that they can actually have choice to be however they want to be moments to moment, so that they can be the right kind of person for the right situation, so that when you find yourself in a situation where a particular kind of person would respond and handle this situation really well, you just be that kind of person in that situation. You find yourself in a different situation, you be the right kind of person in that situation, rather than thinking that you're a fish out of water, that you can't adapt, that you can't, there are certain places that you just can't fit in, there are certain things that you just can't do because you just don't have the stuff to be able to do that. A lot of people come to this course and they're attracted by the whole, be able to read people and, communicate more influentially because you know exactly the right things to say and all of that kind of stuff. or for any number of other reasons. But in spite of the way that people might be attracted to the course, by the time we really get into things, they really start to appreciate this as a personal development experience, as a way of developing yourself and expanding your capabilities and expanding your kind of growing beyond your limits,
Right.
so that you can be more, as it were.
Yeah, I can speak to that experience just through myself and also watching the rest of the group. I mean, when people came in feeling initially uncomfortable about adopting certain postures that, say, had to do with being playful or independent, kind of oriented on the self and expressive, when you got us doing those postures, all of a sudden people were breaking out into laughter, and they were kind of getting more playful, and it was instant. The other part of it was that people who wanted to get in touch with their heart feelings, that was a big thing too, because the class wasn't about therapy or anything like that, but I think several of us had nice breakthroughs emotionally, because when we connected into those memes associated with heart feeling, heart sense, love, peace, respect, et cetera, tears broke out. Just really, really genuine tears of emotional expression coming out. And the safety, because we were in that meme anyway, was okay. It was completely okay to just sort of be yourself. And that's what I wanted to talk about next, which is this preconception people came in with, the who am I, who I think I am, and I'm going to be able to hide who I am, and you're not going to be able to see me, and maybe I'm nervous because you study the spiral stuff and you're going to see who I am. But by the end of the course, people were like, it's okay to be me. Yeah, it's completely fine that you see who I am, because this isn't an unsafe space for that, and it's wonderful because now I get to realize that I can't not be me. Yeah. No matter how I'm being, I'm still being me. Yeah, and people go in with an idea that they're going to hide that, but you can't really. You're just an open book. Yeah. That's super cool.
That is pretty cool. And I really want to take a moment to just indicate for those people who are, if you're listening to this right now and you've just heard Carlos talking about how, people, tears were coming out and stuff like that, that's not something that happens every time I run this course. It's not a default expectation or anything like that.
Yeah,
it's not like this is the kind of course where it's all, exploring childhood trauma and people breaking down and going through boxes of tissues and stuff like that. Yeah. It just so happened with this particular group, because again, you just respond to what's happening in the group in front of you, and with this particular group, that's something that happened. Yeah, and it's something that
they were also laughing their asses off. And,
that's true,
and having fun and giggling. And to be fair, no one was going through their childhood traumas per se, but they were just sort of realizing, wow, this is really profoundly deep to be able to be exactly who I am in front of other people. Yeah, and to be accepted and not judged. And so for a lot of people, that was a very emotional, experience.
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing to recognize, and this is something that is a big part of the training in Spiral Somatics, but I think just broadly in the world, I think it's an important thing to recognize that there are lots of different ways that people do the world. There are lots of different ways that people make sense of things, the ways that people filter their experience, the ways that people decide on the particular choices that they're going to make, and all of that kind of thing. And all of those ways of doing the world are all good. There's no bad guys, as it were. And I think that's a really important thing in terms of your relationships with other people, to recognize that just because someone is different from you doesn't mean that they're bad in any way. It just means that if you have a sense of someone being bad, then either there's resources that they're missing, there's something that they're missing, or it's just that you don't really understand. You don't really understand where they're coming from. You don't understand the motivations and what they're experiencing and their backstory and all of that kind of stuff. But that also applies really equally to oneself, because there's lots of people that will, they'll be kind of parts of themselves. There'll be, urges, and there'll be, priorities, and there'll be things that they don't talk about very much, because they feel like, I shouldn't have these feelings, I shouldn't have these thoughts, I should be more of this kind of person, kind of thing, And so they kind of suppress certain things, which in most cases, are they're harmless, they're normal. It's just that they might not be as as widely approved among certain group of people or something like that. People have got all sorts of stuff where they just because of the way that their parents lived or the way that their peers like to do things, they have this idea, well this is how people are supposed to be, so I have to be this way, even if there's parts of me that want other things, that want to experience the world differently. And so they suppress those things a little bit. They kind of put those things down. And so when people have the realization that it's all good, then there's a certain degree of self-acceptance that emerges from that, which is just, it's a really, it's a nice thing.
And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people don't realize that how they're experiencing the world is also how they're projecting themselves into the world. I just run into so many people who think that life happens to them, and they're not really very aware of, as you say, how they do the world, right? It's not a verb for them. It's this very passive thing, and that happens to them, and they have no control over it, not even over the filter. It's just like, boom, there it is. So when you say doing the world, it's a really interesting phrase. It's quite odd for people when they first hear that. They're like, what do you mean doing the world?
Yeah, well, the way that you are, the way that you make sense of things, the way that the attitudes that you hold and the decisions that you make and all that kind of stuff, all that stuff resonates outwards. And I don't mean in a like hippie energetic kind of way. I mean like in a really literal way. If you're someone who, for example, if you're someone who believes that everyone is out to get you, right? And you go into a bar, right? That attitude is going to inform the way that you conduct yourself in that bar, right? You're probably not going to be just all warm and cuddly and stuff like that when you go into that bar, right? If you're someone who believes that everybody's out to get you, you're probably going to be a little bit reserved. You're going to hold yourself back. You're going to kind of look at people in particular ways. And when people see you looking at them in those ways, they're going to then form perceptions about you, and that's going to affect the relationship between you and all that kind of. So everything about the way that you hold yourself, the attitudes that you have, all of that kind of stuff, it affects the interactions that you have with other human beings around you. And unless you live on a mountain somewhere with no other human beings around you, it is quite powerfully affecting. You are contributing to the experience of the world that you're having. There's these kind of feedback and feed forward systems that take place there. And so it is very much it's not just a passive process, even though you might think, well, this is just my internal experience. Your internal experience is having an effect on the people around you, which is then, because of the nature of your internal experience, going to reinforce the beliefs that you have, because as I think it was Robert Anton Wilson once said, or it might have come from elsewhere, what the thinker thinks, the prover proves. Whatever beliefs that you have about how things are, you're going to find evidence to support those beliefs. You're not going to notice the counterexamples. No matter what you think, no matter what your beliefs are, you're going to find these things, which is why you get some really interesting stuff with Facebook at the moment, for example, is doing a fantastic job of creating spectacular echo chambers where the only thing that really gets reflected back to you is the stuff that you already believe, the way that you think about things, which I think is potentially going to lead to people with narrower and narrower views of the world and more certainty in their own kind of beliefs, let's say. But even without the, things like Facebook kind of amplifying this echo chamber kind of thing, no matter what you believe, you're going to, because the sheer fact of you believing it means that you're going to unconsciously look for supporting evidence that supports for that belief. And you're going to delete any evidence that is in contradiction with that. And so your beliefs just continue to reinforce themselves, and they get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And so they just amplify and shape your experience of the outside world in such a way that it aligns with your internal experience. And so it is really you're not just kind of perceiving things in a particular way. You are, through your very actions, kind of creating the things that are going to reinforce those perceptions.
you are also coming back fairly shortly, like at the end of May, beginning of June, to teach something for people who have had some experience with NLPs. People who've had at least a 7-day practitioner course, and you're coming back. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that. First of all, you're calling it Empty-Handed NLP.
Yes.
So let's start with that, because that's a very interesting title, and then we can get into what it is.
Cool. Well, it comes from a story from my past. When I first started learning NLP, and when I decided to undergo my apprenticeship to become a trainer of NLP, which is something that I did. Like the vast majority of NLP trainers these days will do typically 3 short courses in a row, and in the space of a few months go from never having heard of NLP to suddenly being experts. I did a 5-year full-time apprenticeship. It was a little bit different, and have since trained with like heaps of people. But when I decided to begin my apprenticeship, when I decided that this is a path that I wanted to kind of pursue, there were certain things that were really important to me in terms of adaptability. Because one of the things that's very important to me is portable skills. When people learn very procedural approaches to things that require a lot of setup, that kind of assume a particular kind of relationship, that assume a particular kind of context, those things are not particularly portable, right? Because you don't have developed the you don't develop the ability to extract the key patterns inside of this and adapt them for a whole bunch of different scenarios, a whole bunch of different situations, working with individuals, working with organizations, working with, in education, and all of those things. And so Empty-Handed NLP came about as a title because a friend of mine once upon a time ran a bookshop called the Esoteric Bookshop in Melbourne. And hi, David, if you ever find yourself listening to this, and hi, Julie. And the Esoteric Bookshop was not just a bookshop; it was kind of a one-stop shop for the pagan community in Australia. And there was a woman called Cassandra Carter, and she was an interesting lady. She was a television script writer, and she was also an expert in Celtic mythology and the tarot, and she was a self-professed witch. And so she was there one day, and just kind of in the background, I'm talking to my friend David, and there was a young woman came into the shop, and she loads herself up with various things, books and essential oils and crystals and all sorts of stuff, and she's running around, she's flustered. And so David's like, well, can I help you? You're okay, right? And she's flustered. She goes, do you have, and she asks for a particular herb. And David explains that, well, there are certain herbs that we can stock, that we can import, that we can get locally. There are other herbs that we can't get locally, and we also can't import because of certain laws in Australia, and that's just one of those ones we can't get that one, I'm sorry. And so she's visibly distressed, right? And David said, well, what do you need it for? And she said, well, I've come across this ritual, you see, and I want to do this ritual. And in the ritual, it says that I need this herb. It says I need a bunch of other things, and I've got everything except for this herb. And I need it for the ritual. And just then, Cassandra Carter piped up, and she said something that, even though it wasn't anything to do with me or my future career, it resonated in my brain. She said to this girl, she said, my dear girl, what I hope that you will one day come to realize is that when it comes to magic, if you can't do it empty-handed, you can't do it. And that really resonated for me in terms of, that's what it's about. That's what I'm talking about in terms of this portability. If you need scripts, if you need step-by-step procedures, if you need someone to hold your goddamn hand, you can't do this, right? If you need to follow something that's set out in a book, you can't do it, right? If you don't understand the patterns, if you don't understand the principles that make these particular processes work, and you don't know how to, adapt those things in any circumstances, you don't know how to take any of these things and be able to, facilitate someone who speaks a different language, where you don't have any shared language, if you don't know how to adapt these things to work with a 2-year-old child, if you don't know how to take this stuff and work with an entire organization as an entity instead of individuals inside that organization. There's, if you don't know how to do that stuff, then you don't know the patterns, right? You don't know how this stuff works. All you've got is a recipe book full of step-by-step procedures that you can follow. And so there's some people in the world of NLP that give people scripts, for example, which is wonderful. You go and you do a 7-day training and you learn how to read. Great. You probably already learned how to read, but you certainly don't learn an awful lot in terms of what makes this stuff work. And, there's no understanding that takes place there. And I think that's very important. And so I'm coming out here in end of May, early June to teach Empty-Handed NLP, which is specifically for people who already have training in NLP, who already have done at minimum of 7 days live in person with a trainer, hands-on with feedback training at NLP practitioner level at minimum. Master practitioners and trainers are definitely welcome. In fact, it's probably more suitable for master practitioners. And we will be taking you from having a whole bunch of tools, having a whole bunch of techniques and procedures and stuff like that, into someone who understands how all of this stuff works and can adapt and can improvise and can make use of the principles and the patterns inside of NLP in any context, with no script, with no step-by-step, here's the recipe. You'll just know this stuff inside out and be able to do anything at the drop of a hat, basically.
Well, I'm salivating. That is really exciting. And just to be clear, this is not a certification course of any kind, right? This is just developing skills. This is what what you can see of us and where we are, and how do you take us to another level? How to in a sense, prepare us to be better learners, better practitioners, and to get out of the tiny little box that we've been in and bring us to at least a bigger, broader space with that thinking, right?
And I'm not saying that people have been in tiny little boxes either. Like there's, the majority of folks out there that have done some kind of NLP training have done it in a procedural kind of a way. But that doesn't mean that they're in a tiny little box. It just means that they haven't learned the kind of flexibility that's possible. They haven't learned how to take this particular thing and use it for anything.
I recognize depth and skill and art, and craft, when it's developed to a high level. And I see that potential and have experienced the experience of improving through your training, because you're a freaking amazing trainer. I'm in front of somebody who's really, really good at this, and I can now stand to benefit from expending my time and my energy and resources to learn. So anyway.
Yeah. And I thank you for your kind words. And this is an example. Like you are someone who is drawn to this, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that's the case for anyone else. And I was just thinking, it's a little bit like imagine learning to play guitar, right? Like imagine someone wants to learn to play guitar. You can have someone that takes some guitar lessons and they learn to play their 5 favorite songs, right? And that's all they can do. They can play their 5 favorite songs, but they're happy because they can play their 5 favorite songs, right? And who the hell is to say that they have to learn anything more than their 5 favorite songs? Like, there's nothing wrong with that. You want to learn your 5 favorites, learn your 5 favorite songs. Right. Or they might learn more than that, and they might learn to play, and they might learn to become a guitarist, and be able to read sheet music and play whatever's in front of them, and that and now great, now they can play guitar, and now they can play more than their 5 favorite songs. They can play any song that's put in front of them, and that's fantastic. Not everyone that picks up a guitar needs to be Eric Clapton,
right?
Kind of thing. Some people might want that, right? And some people might want to move towards that. Some people might want to be able to learn to play improvisational jazz, right? They might want to be like just amazing and do all of this cool stuff. And it's the same kind of thing with this NLP training stuff. There's a lot of people that have learned to play their 5 favorite songs, and that's cool. And there's a lot of people that have learned to read sheet music, right? And they can play any number of things that and that's cool as well. And there are some people that want to play improvisational jazz, and there's some people that want to be Eric Clapton, and that's full. That's the path that you're on. That's fine. It just happens that you, Carlos, are someone who wants to go further. You want to do different things, in which case, great, I'll see you in May.
Fantastic.
And I'll see you with some other people as well. I think it's really important that, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is that it's easy for some people in this industry, and I don't mean just NLP. I mean, just seminars kind of stuff,
Yeah.
It's very easy for people to get a little bit culty, right?
Yeah,
a little
that's
bit
true.
kind of insistent on, you must do this, and then you must do the next thing, and then you must do the next thing, and that kind of thing. And I don't think that's helpful, and I don't think it's healthy, because it's just not for everyone. I'm a big believer in doing the stuff that you want and that you need and that you're drawn to, and just going with that,
Also, quite frankly, I noticed that there are different types of experiences people seek with regard to self-improvement. Like for some people, it's enough just simply to have, let me learn a couple of things, and I don't want to be disturbed too much. I don't want to feel agitated. I don't want to feel perturbed about it. I just want to learn a couple things and not have that questioned in any way. And there are other folks that kind of enjoy getting their ass kicked a little bit, not for the sake of getting their ass kicked, but in the sense of, wow, this is going to make me better, and I can go, whoa, that really freaking kicked my ass, but wow, am I learning so much, because there isn't this ass kicking, so to speak, with quotes around it, right, is just like high standards and being pushed through a rigorous program of some kind. I have a broader question that I'd like to ask you about NLP and people's attitude about it. Okay. I was kind of aching to ask you this. So there are a couple things that have come up in the academic community. In particular, certain people who have a very negative point of view about neurolinguistic programming. I've seen quite a few sort of hatchet pieces, if you will, like articles written to kind of dissuade people from being interested in it, looking into it, etc. And some of that includes, very sort of one-sided attacks, I guess, if you will. Could we talk about that just for a moment? Because I feel like some people do run into that, and I've been spoken to about it a couple of times. It'd be nice to kind of have a nice talk about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm a fan, and I've made so many references to this over the past week or so forgive me. I'm a big fan of a magnificent masterpiece of literature called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, there's a book that's literally called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? It's this little electronic book that has, it auto-updates and this kind of thing. And it's sold quite well because it's much smaller, more portable to carry around than the Encyclopedia Galactica, which was the the sum total of all knowledge of arts and sciences and history and all of that kind of stuff, which unfortunately was just like really, 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 really big and cumbersome, and nobody bought it. Whereas the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is much easier to read, much less accurate, but nonetheless, it's an easy read, it's portable, all of this kind of thing. And so it ended up kind of superseding the Encyclopedia Galactica as the the standard source of all knowledge. Basically, people would just refer to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And so, not an ideal kind of thing. And it was something that was written as a bit of a joke, right? Like this is a book that was written, it's a humorous kind of book. And we have that now. That's happened now, right? There's this thing called Wikipedia, and it's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Got it.
Right? It's the place that people go to get data about things. And it's a terrible place to go to get data about things, especially because of the culture of Wikipedia, the rules of Wikipedia with different kind of editors and different levels of privilege and that kind of thing, right? If you're someone at a certain level in the Wikipedia system, you can kind of overwrite like other people, right? And so what a lot of people do when they're kind of finding out about NLP is they'll go Wikipedia and they'll find the NLP Wikipedia page, right? And what they don't know, because it's not really kind of there on the page, is that page is pretty much just dominated by this one guy, Dave Snowden, and he's got a bee in his bonnet about NLP, and so the Wikipedia page is just terrible. It just says all this rot, and anytime anyone tries to update it, anytime someone goes, cool, well, here's a whole bunch of research, right?
Here's a counterexample.
Here's counterexamples. Here's a whole bunch of stuff. Here's stuff like that. It'll just get overruled, right? Those edits will be deleted, and it'll just be reset to the way that it was before, right? And so, the ideal of Wikipedia is something that's constantly being kind of updated as people get new data and that kind of thing. It's just patently not the case. And the NLP page on Wikipedia is a classic example of that. And I'm really interested, by the way, because one of my there's a guy that I know in Tasmania who's trained in NLP. He's done a lot of stuff with John Grinder, for example, and is pretty close with John Grinder, and he does work with this guy David Snowden. Right?
Really?
And so I reckon they would have some interesting conversations.
I bet.
Yeah.
Was he involved at all with the NLP wiki thing? There's another sort of wiki page.
The NLP wiki was a response to the Wikipedia page on NLP, right?
Okay. Did it ever reach maturity?
It's there, it's out there, but it's not Wikipedia, right?
Yeah,
so,
people don't know about it.
People go to Wikipedia and they get this crap, and so that's a big kind of thing, right? And so there's a lot of people, they go to the Wikipedia page, right? And then and it's hilarious, right? Because every now and then you encounter people. I have students, for example, and sometimes they say, my cousin sent me this thing and he said this and this about NLP, right? And I read the thing and it takes like 3 seconds to go, he's been to the Wikipedia page, right? That's how you get your data. That's how, this is what people these days refer to laughably as research. Right. Research is you go to the Wikipedia page and you look at this crap and you go, so Wikipedia very authoritative,
Right.
And it's good Lord, it's ridiculous. And and oftentimes there's going to be references there to some papers written in 1984, and 1987.
Yeah.
Where some people made some straw man arguments about NLP and then, tested those arguments. So, people basically investigated what they said was, here's a claim that NLP makes, which was not a claim that anyone in the field of NLP would actually back, right? And they investigated that claim, found that it was false. So this thing that no one actually gives any credence to in the field of NLP, they tested and found that was false, therefore NLP is crap.
Well, presumably it was no one of note, right? Like maybe it might have been a minor person teaching NLP who said
it might have
that,
been someone
who teaches it, but not necessarily like one of the people you would have respected, for example, as a founder or co-developer or something like that, right?
And there's so much involved in NLP. There's so many, because NLP fundamentally it's about modeling, right? Like this is NLP is a discipline concerned with identifying exemplars of exquisite skill, people who are exceptionally skilled at something or other, finding out what those people do that they themselves don't know that they do, that allows them to have that degree of skill where other people in their fields don't have the same degree of skill. That's what NLP is. It's modeling. It's finding freaks and finding out how they do what they do, right? But the result of that, the end result of that, is a whole bunch of processes for all sorts of things. You model a currency trader. What you get is, here's a process. Here's a model for how to be successful at currency trading. You model a therapist. You go, here's how to do. You model a Gestalt therapist, Fritz Perls. Here's how you do Gestalt therapy really well. You model a salesperson. Here's how you do sales really well. You're right. And so, consequently, over nearly 40 years now. It's getting pretty close to, I think. Might even be, I don't know. I'm not doing my maths very good right now. But over decades anyway, there have been heaps of things that have come out of that process. And they're all wildly different things because the core of NLP is just modeling. And so, sometimes what happens is somebody will pick one of these things that someone came up with 30 years ago, and they'll take that as representative of everything in NLP. Are the eye accessing cues an example of that? Oh, classic load of bollocks. So,
okay, can we talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
Because there was just a reason why I say that, because Smithsonian just published an article, as if it were the first time this information was ever coming out, about how it was a bunch of bunk, and it was, again, straw man arguments about how if a person looks to the left, they're lying; look to the right, et cetera, et cetera. Or looking to the right.
Yeah, the first time that I heard of the, someone looks to the left, they're telling the truth, someone looks to the right, they're lying kind of thing, was from a movie called The Negotiator with Samuel L. Jackson.
Right.
Way back in the days.
That.
I remember seeing that and going, wait a minute, what? What the hell? It's something that, like, someone got that idea in their head somehow, right? Yeah. And, in the field of NLP, we've never said anything like that, right? Yeah. And nonetheless, it's this idea that people have had, which is complete bunk. But but that's the Wikipedia kind of side of things. That's the the folks that do their exhaustive research by Googling and coming up with crap. However, in terms of the reputation of NLP, there's a lot of other things that are really fair criticism, frankly, right? Like, because of the way that the field has developed over the past, in particular over the past 30 years, since kind of the late 80s. Certain things happened in the field in the late 80s. And so for the past 30 years, there has been a proliferation of people selling shiny baubles, and they don't actually know how to do anything, but they just like tell someone, do this thing and your life will transform forever.
Right.
And if it doesn't, well, that just means that you need to come back and do the next course, and then that will mean that your life will change forever. And if it doesn't, well, then clearly you need to come back and do the first course again, and you can pay us again for doing the first course, and that'll mean that your life will change forever in every conceivable way. There's a lot of like snake oil. I think that's the phrase that I was after.
Yes.
There's a lot of snake oil out there,
right.
An enormous amount of it. And it's not always intentional, but there's this whole vibe, right? There's this vibe of kind of promising ridiculous things, and almost in a religious kind of sense. It's there's a lot of kind of overlap between a lot of what's out there in the field of NLP and the whole law of attraction kind of stuff. And I don't mean law of attraction in the sense of, people who believe that having this kind of mindset while you're going out there and doing things in the world to get your goals is a valuable thing. I mean law of attraction in the sense of the people who believe that having this particular mindset and then sitting around and the universe will just give stuff to you,
right,
kind of thing,
Right.
There's a lot of kind of an overlap. Like, this is the magic key. This is the golden ticket. This is the magic wand. You just do this thing, and miraculously you will become rich and famous and successful, and women will fawn all over you, and you'll be on the front cover of Forbes magazine and all of that kind of stuff, right?
I can do that.
No. Well, with enough persistence and hard work, yeah, probably. But,
okay. Thank God.
But there's a lot of that kind of thing. Like, it's slimy. It's just, you know. And so a lot of the criticisms of the field of NLP in that particular regard, like, people promising things that are just ludicrous, and the whole thing just being sell, frankly, is a pretty fucking fair assessment of the vast majority of the field.
Right.
Not everybody.
No, but we do see that.
But yeah, you do see a lot of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I know that you have personal reference for some of that kind of thing.
I do, absolutely.
And
not a fan.
Yeah, it's sad, and it works out for me though, because it's really cool. Like, I get a lot of people come to train with me because they go Googling, right?
Yeah.
And they Google a bunch of websites of NLP trainers and whatnot, and then they find my website and they go, and they contact me and they go, I wanted to come and train with you because I looked at a whole bunch of other websites, right? And they all just looked so salesy and hypey, and it's like, I just didn't trust that they looked dodgy, and right. And yours is not salesy, it's not hypey. It's like, you seem pretty much. I remember Jamie, right? So Jamie Smart is a friend of mine from a ways back. He'd had an experience here in the States somewhere where someone had gone to some events that he'd done, or he'd met some people, and they gave him a particular compliments. They said, I've met lots of NLP guys, right? And it's so nice to meet someone like you because you're the first NLP guy that I've met that's just normal.
Oh. Yeah.
And so I'm, he's interviewing me in Leicester, and he told me that, and he just said, I'd like to extend the same compliment because I've had the same thing. I know lots of NLP guys, and it's so nice to meet an NLP guy that's just normal,
Meaning someone you can actually talk to who...
Yeah, just normal human being. Rather
real
than...
feelings, genuine.
Yeah,
larger than... Instead of being larger than life all the time. And
exactly.
Super highly polished and...
Not having to be super duper, like I'm king of everything, or, I'm... radiant being of light, or shiny suits, or any of that. Just normal person kind of thing, And so, I get people coming to train with me because of that, right? Like they go to websites, they look at other trainers, they go to other trainers' events, and then they come and see me, and they go, "Oh, thank God!" Right? Yeah. There's so much stuff out there, and on the one hand, yay, that's nice for me, but on the other hand, it's kind of sad for the field, because there's just so much stuff out there. This is an experience that so many people have. They go out there and they find someone who's an NLP trainer, and they, if they look at the website, or they get a product, or they go to a seminar or an evening event or something like that, and in many cases they just get this overall impression of like, this is just its shiny hype, rah salesy kind of stuff, and there is so much of that in the field, it's a really big thing. And so when people make those kind of criticisms, when people talk about NLP as, it's sleazy stuff, and there's people that are just constantly trying to sell things, and there's people that are constantly trying to, make out that you do this thing and your whole, you're going to suddenly be Tony Robbins and all of that kind of stuff. When people make those criticisms, they're kind of right. That's a large portion of the field, and over the past 30 years, that kind of portion of the field has just swelled to the point where the people who don't do that are in a minority now. There's a very, very small number of people. Like I was looking at, here we are in California, right? This is a really populous state. This is like the most populous state in the US, is that? Like you got a lot of people
I would say
here?
so, yeah.
Yeah, like you got heaps of people, lots and lots of people in this state,
Tons. Yeah.
A lot more than in Australia. Probably got like 5 times the population of Australia or something just in California,
Yeah.
And so I was looking around because I wanted to kind of hook up with some people in the NLP field here. I want to kind of make some connections and, get to know some people. And so I've been, talking to people, and I've been Googling, and I've been just kind of, who do I want to connect with here? Who are the people that are not the hypey, shiny suits, big teeth, self-salvation kind of folks. And there's only a couple of schools, and by a couple I mean 2.
Yeah.
That are, people that really stand out in contrast to that. Because it's like the field is just, and it's like that everywhere, right? Like the field is just full of hype, essentially. But there's still good people out there. It's just a case of kind of sorting through and finding them, let's say,
And some of them don't necessarily call what they do NLP, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, there's like people like Steve Gilligan we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, that's right. And I also wouldn't call it what he does NLP.
Yeah.
But there's good people out there. But speaking of Steve Gilligan, like Robert Dilts, for example,
Robert
right?
Dilts,
like this is, he's been around for years, and he's not a shiny suit, hype, sell the dream, sell kind of guy. He's a very different kind of guy, this is the guy who's, the motto for this guy's school is, it's about creating a world to which people want to belong.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And that whole, it's a different vibe. The late Steve Andreas, for example.
Yeah.
About as far from hype as you can get,
Right.
Just a wonderful guy. There's people out there. It's just that you have to kind of sort through a bunch of stuff to find them, and so that is a very valid criticism that a lot of people make about the field of NLP. I wouldn't say it's the case for everyone, because it's not, right? But there's a lot.
I'm glad we talked about that, because, it's obvious to me that's not all there is, but there are a lot of people who won't dip into it simply because that's the only impression they have. And that is why I didn't get into it earlier, because I thought it was that. Yeah. It wasn't until I had an example of a person being vulnerable in front of me who was a trainer, who I thought, she's doing her best to be real, and she's doing her best to apply this to herself and her life, and not to be the snake oil salesman, step right up, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, it was like a doorway entering into something,
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, gosh, James, this has been great to revisit a lot of this stuff and to talk about new things with you. It's always great speaking with you.
Thank you. It's always great speaking with you.
thanks for being on the show again.
Thank you for being. Because this is really like, the last time I was on the show, I was in Melbourne. Right,
yeah.
We did that by Zoom. Right?
Yes.
So it's nice actually being here face to face and having this conversation. It's cool.
Yes, it is. Very much so. And I'm really looking forward to being in your course coming up in May.
Looking forward to having you there.
So I'd like to invite folks to stay in touch with you if they're interested, right? So if they're curious about NLP, curious about you, and want to ask you a question, how do they get in touch with you?
They can go to www.nlpmelbourne.com.au for Australia. Or they can find me at facebook.com/NLP Melbourne. Again, MELBOURNE. And they'll find me.
Fantastic.
You've been listening to The Authenticity Show with your host, Carlos Casados. Very special thanks to our guest, James Tsakalos. This show was produced by myself, Oliver Altine. I also wrote the theme music for the show, which you're listening to right now. We would love it if you subscribe to our show on iTunes, Android Market, Stitcher Radio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please check us out and like us on Facebook, YouTube, all the places, all the things, we're there. And our website, if you're into that kind of thing, is authenticityshow.com. Thank you for listening, and have an authentic day.